Hey, everybody. I just want to warn you that I am trying out a couple of new things with this podcast. One, I've got some intro music. Let me know what you think about that. And I've done the production on this thing myself. I've done it in several goes. It's got several tracks. I'm not sure I really got all the levels right, so it's a little all over the place. Just want to give you a heads up about that in case like the volume or something about the, general timbre of my voice goes completely, AWOL at some point in here. Okay, so here's the music and then the introduction and then the thing that you're going to actually try to listen to today. Okie dokie. All right, here, just a sec. Good on you, listener. You've found the Gorgon Posse podcast of Medusa Rising, world building women. We have huge ambitions, so we create and publish slowly and thoughtfully. We seek to deepen support and coalition among feminists globally and to publish new writing and art by women in order to facilitate that coalition building. Thriving movements draw on grassroots work, spiritual traditions, mutual aid networks, personal growth, and on theory. We're here with you in all of that becoming because we know at Medusa Rising that patriarchy is an interlocking social, psychological, legal, economic, and cultural system that supports male supremacy. It was born in the commodification, rape, and murder of women. And now it is reasserting its drive to dominance in both far right and far left political and cultural movements. It has existed in remarkably consistent forms for 5,000 years, and Medusa Rising means for this millennium to be its last. To share your work with us, or tell us about a great feminist organization you want us all to know about, or subscribe to our newsletter, click on over to medusarising.org. Meanwhile, stay rad, stay witchy, and be good to each other. I'm Esmée Streachailt, founder and editor of this joint, and today, my guest is me. Hey, sisters and readers. I wanted to bring you today a piece that I wrote a long, long time ago. I wrote an essay called Écriture futuriste, which just means the writing of the future, a feminine writing of the feminine future, that I published in an anthology a long time ago, in my other life, right? As I like to say. So what I want to read to you is not quite the final version that ended up in the anthology, but this sort of meditative, almost poetry, almost bad poetry, early draft that I wrote while I was thinking about this question of an écriture futuriste. What would it be like for women to write ourselves, to write our bodies, to write our way of being and feeling into the world, and add that subjectivity, as they say in theory, into the process of history. This is, I believe, a goal of cultural feminism or difference feminism that we have not yet achieved, along with so many others, because we get these little fake goals or these little partial goals or these promises that these politicians never keep. But I digress. So, let me dive in. This is very Irigarayan. You will hear in it some early pings and pongs of topics and themes that I'm still working on, Hélène Cixous says that every writer comes into the world to say one thing, and they just say that thing all their lives in every way that they can possibly imagine or encounter. And that may be true. I don't know that I've been saying the same thing all my life, but maybe I have been. So I shall begin reading to you now. Feminism muses to herself where to begin, not being certain where the break from the last ending would be. Which of the old agendas would I drop? a project for my sovereignty over my body, the project for the rescue of so many bodies from the hands of their masters, the project for political rights, for the recovery of my gender's rich intellectual and artistic history, for the creation of dialects in my own rhythms, for the alliance of my many ethnicities, for the support of my society in my work, in motherhood, in all of my creativity, for the study of the past, present, past, where my portraits in words and light vie for my one-dimensionality. Would I give that up? I think I would give up one-dimensionality. For the acknowledgement that as much as I am naturally a whore, he is naturally a tyrant, a torturer. Where to begin in the absence of any of these conclusions? Feminism muses to herself. If a central goal of feminism is the establishment of feminine or female subjectivity in the cultural and political symbolic, and not merely in the marginal sort of meta territories of theory and literature, then the écriture, the writing of that subjectivity, needs to be taught, needs to be published more widely. If we back up in history to the long battle of the one God and the masculine as subject to establish itself supreme, the insecure God of the Old Testament, so fearful of Inanna, the laws of Manu that allow for female deities, but the earthly deification only of men, we see that the current natural order is much more current than natural. The work of feminism is to change this long-standing habit, masculinism, male supremacy, and insurgently as necessary to dislodge it, not to its death, but to its difference, to its evolution, to even more life. As with the first gender revolution into masculinism, into male supremacy, this work requires the radical revision of culture, of the symbolic, of the laws and the habits and the traditions that we share. It is the work of the humanities, the arts and the humanities, and very much the concerns of literature and its theories. The teaching of reading and the teaching of reading not only other minds, but other subjectivities, other encounters with culture, other encounters with other selves, in styles other than the masculine, in the body of the man and the woman, is one crucial locus or fulcrum of this insurgency. You see, once upon a time, I had a real faith that we could write our way into a future that wouldn't suck as much as this one does. So I continue. I choose that incendiary word with deliberation. The symbolic restyling of the feminine in culture manages always to suit the needs and desires of the masculine, or at least those are the only parts that are allowed, that are accepted into the symbolic, leaving her a kind of client state, a puppet regime, against which the gender feminine is still a rebel. A feminism amenable to co-optation by the masculine is not strong enough. This was an underlying fear of difference feminisms, such as Irigaray, that it would too quickly recoup back to the dangerous essentialism of Friedan's feminine mystique, which it turns out was no kind of essentialism at all. That danger was not lost on Irigaray, nor on her contemporaries or commentators, and now on her intellectual daughters. The difference Irigaray eventually wrote her way into closely mirrors the kinds of robust men and women, masculine and feminine, that Friedan notices emerging in the early 1960s and reports on at the end of The Feminine Mystique. I've been rattling on a little bit about Maslow and about self-actualization being the psychological state of political liberation, right? Like, this idea has been rolling around in my head for ages in many ways. The resistant texts of the experimental traditions, the avant-garde, the voices of the feminine mind and body, in their genre and in their individual variation, are pedagogical sites of not only the history of a set of literatures, writing by women, but of the other logics and imaginaries or imaginations or subconsciouses other to the masculine, the male supremacist, the rational, logical male subject, the default male, and its deep structural refusal to make room for the feminine, for anything that it calls its other. But it must welcome its necessary other in life in order to live, to experience vitality. Against that refusal, against the no of the masculine itself, this essay offers an insurgent's guide to cultural existence. Right? I keep coming back around to this idea of the insurgent, the guerrière, right? The feminist cultural terrorist. Feminism asks herself in the mirror. We suffer for a lack of genealogy and avatars created on our own terms, in our own styles and ways of speaking flit everywhere through my last century that trust logics of curvature and reverb, cousin voices to that écriture I said is feminine when I was writing about Sixou. I can read them, or at least I can inhabit the turbulence they stir in me. They surge, don't they, up into the didactic linear spaces like revolution. These feminine voices, they surge, they stir, they are turbulent. They move up against the didacticism, the instrumentalism, the linear thinking of the male default. We are hungry for that revolution, the herselves of feminism. We are hungry for that revolution, and I and my cousins hungry for a world that lives in the implications of language knowingly, authentically. I need men and women who can read in masculine and feminine, who can have two sources of truth. If we reckon with only the last 210 years, a tradition that could be called experimental dates to the German romantics like Hölderlin or Friedrich Schlegel, or to the French Mallarmé and Rimbaud, or also in the 19th century, all of these, Walt Whitman and Emily Dickinson. And then into the 20th century to Gertrude Stein and Wallace Stevens and H.D. Though considered aberrations in their day, the Romantic, the Symbolist, and the Modernist modes of literary and philosophical production have become the bones of our literary body now. At least when we consider the vigor and the variation of that body's living cells and organs. To skip some genealogy, in just the last 4 decades, this bisexual body has given birth to discourses as vigorous and varied as deconstruction, as language poetry, as the postmodern novel, as the modes of writing termed feminine in both literature and philosophy. But less so in the world of criticism or commentary. Less so in that rational world of asking the question, how good is it? Should we accept it? These are the exclusionary questions, right? The didactic questions. In that world, texts of jouissance, right? Writings of almost unembodiable joy, pleasure, continue to be considered by male default readers, monovocal readers, as unreadable, or as primary texts on a good day, or as just unrigorous, silly. A few journals publish such work, feminist or not, experimental or not, and their readership is largely composed of other readers of similarly swervy or polyvocal turns of mind, who can also read monovocal male default texts when they want to. Because in part, readers of a more traditional turn of mind won't learn to read them, won't become polylingual in this way, won't work to discover the rigor of other forms. Indeed, In the regard of masculinist culture, male default culture, feminism is considered unreadable and unrigorous, while within the academy, the écriture féminine, on which my title plays, was often seen as unreadable, unintelligible, the babble of women. This situation has implications for reading and writing, for the continued development of a rich tradition in letters and thought, and for feminism in both theory and in realization. Since the tradition will take care of itself, it will evolve and mutate as it must and always has, I trust its strength. Where reading and writing are concerned, where feminism is concerned, however, I am more concerned. Moreover, I believe these two matters are intertwined. That belief grows from my centers of gravity as a thinker and critic in literature and philosophy, and in feminisms both radical and cultural. I hold three axioms from which this essay flows. One, reading and writing are central to the creation and the dissemination of culture and of one's own being. Two, the dominant culture is still monovocal, male default, especially in the case of academic critical writing. And 2A, oh God, I've always been doing this, right? There's three axioms, 1, 2, 2A, and then 3. So 2A is that monovocal culture is also dominantly masculine, masculinist, the male default. And so are most of the selves in it, the subjectivities in it. They're all shaped by that male default way of thinking, even when they are women. 3, the ultimate goal of feminism is cultures in which masculine or male and feminine or female modes of being human are fully incorporated into the symbolic, the imaginary of everyday life, into all of our cultural ways of meaning, our ways of reading our history, creating art, imagining our futures. So in the end, this entire essay is about shape. It's about shapes of thought and learning to have or inhabit and exist in and admire more than one of those shapes. I'm suggesting a broader sense of both rigor and what counts as realistic, hence an écriture futuriste. You can't get there from here, but you can pretend. Sometimes a cigar is just a symbol, clinging to the loss as if it would protect you against the loss. A line of zeros, totally nothing. This is not a sentence. It's from a poem by Alan Bernstein. You can't get there from here, but you can pretend. Sometimes a cigar is just a symbol, clinging to the loss as if it would protect you against the loss. A line of zeros, totally nothing. This is not a sentence. Bernstein. In the essay, The Sharing of Speech, Irigaray responds to this monovocal male default world, as if speaking directly to it almost. A closed word, that didactic way of thinking, a closed word is always already a testamentary legacy. It is a sign of death, which is transmitted without serving to communicate with. It is broadcast, but it is not communication. There is no communing. It can seduce. It can become the other's property, as can be that of a people or of a tradition. It is not really shared between two, masculine and feminine. The problem in such a conception of the symbolic, of meaning, of structure, of order, of law, is that the becoming of the relation between two, the relation being life and mercy, is not secured. Proximity is then defined through an object and not a movement of approximation between subjects. This is from the book called The Way of Love. And what she's saying here in her very French theoretical way is that the didactic way of speaking is a transmission. It is pedagogical. It is broadcast. It is propaganda mostly. But it's not a conversation. It's not a communion. right? So the life that's being shared in it is only from one side, only from male default. And it comes near to the other, but it can only approach the other as an object, right? I teach you, not we teach, not we teach us, right? So that movement is not an approximation between subjects, which would be we teach us. Now, the poet Bernstein and Luce Irigaray argue for reading, for listening, and being beyond ourselves as models of the male default or natural and beyond any kind of realism. It is reality. Bernstein, in terms of the materiality of language, its sound, its texture, the way that we write it, the way that we broadcast it, the way that we share it, is one phenomenon to be encountered, even represented, while Irigaray is arguing that between the masculine, which is, and the feminine, which is yet to be in our culture, we want to establish an open word, not a closed word, an open word that does not consider the manner of the gender, the other's being, right? So it doesn't consider the other's gender or the other's way of being a threat to itself or to the natural order, but as a source of wonder and vivacity in it, right? An approximation between subjects is a relation in which there is always evolution going on. There is always change because there is vibration and oscillation between the two. An open word, something a little more indeterminate, right? And the trick there is to teach ourselves to accept that indeterminacy without interpreting it as a threat, because that's where surprise and wonder and aliveness are. They're in that space where we encounter the indeterminate and do not respond to it as a threat. As Bernstein wrote, we don't cling to the loss as if it would protect us against the loss. The founding sense of the gendered other, woman, the feminine, she is gendered, man is just humans, right? The founding sense of this other, woman, is that she is a threat to man. She is a threat to the good, to the just, to the reason he shares with his God. Jory Graham, the poet, reads the story of Eve, this founding threat, this birth into death, very differently. Graham writes, but in the myth, at the beginning of our world, matter, God X, wants to remain asleep. He, it is a he, resists arousal. A war ensues. A trust, us, now, and he must marry change. It is a she, beginning the long unwinding, every step of which is now, just now, curious small house, out of which the great girl turns. It's not really the story of Eve so much as it's the story of Kali, or it's the story of Asherah, right? It's the story of Adam's first wife. She's the one who wakes him up. She's the one who goes to war, beginning the long unwinding of every step of which is now, just now, the constant fall Christianity imagines us to be enmeshed in. Turn, Jory Graham writes, turn. The great girl turns. Turn, turn, Graham writes. This is the medicine. It will make you well. This is from a poem called History. She writes about such small things. So Eve is here also Shakti, awakening Adam or Shiva to life. She is the voluptuous and the uncertain, the indeterminate. He must marry change, neither without their risks, but risklessness is a simple uterine fantasy, the garden, the isolate mountain on top of which illumination does not wait. So what Bernstein and Irigaray and Graham want to do is interact with the nature of language itself, rather than only what we habitually take it to represent, right? Bernstein is pointing that out. He's hinting at that by pointing to Foucault's painting, This Is Not a Pipe, or the book, This Is Not a Pipe, about the painting, when he writes, this is not a sentence. A rigore is engaging with the nature of language itself by imagining how men and women might be co-equals in language, where we make our symbolic systems, our law, our order, and in spirit, where our imagination, our possibility lies. And let each of those be self-defined, rather than living in a world we live in right now, where whatever it is to be a woman is still largely defined by whatever the fuck men want. Jory Graham, is code switching between Christian and Hindu creation stories, between physics and maths. Each is on the side of reality. Each of these writers is on the side of reality as much as Dickens or Hemingway. Each is on the side of life, but not on the side of conventions that constrict it. To be sure, that monovocal male default discourse, that way of thinking and speaking, offers us the advantages of familiarity, facility, but it and its values are not the whole of values. A future requires imagination. A future requires that the great girl turn. Feminism turns herself outward. What, they keep asking, do women want? I have painted, written, sung, reported, and filmed myself almost out of breath explaining that to them. Where are the feminists? They always ask. The question returns and returns, as from Echo's Canyon in the myth. The answer is not one, not a unified field theory of woman. The answer is many, messy, general, and particular. What women want, each of us. I am as naturally various of desire and temperament as he is, naturally. I turn over a millennium, and still he is asking this. He is resistant to paradox, to two truths. I have a new shape in mind, a new shape of mind for us. We accept that poetry will disobey. It will disobey prose. In fact, that's poetry's job, is to disobey prose. We accept that some poetry and some prose is so disobedient that we claim we cannot read it. Jory Graham, Bernstein, often a rigore, often called unreadable. We will call it avant-garde, experimental, paratactical, juxtaposed rather than posed or transited or linear. It will be much more reliant on metaphor and gaps in metaphors than on trains of thought. Or if one's prose is Gertrude Stein's prose, it's almost too linear and too fluid and too easily transited to read. Because to read is to be transited, to be taken somewhere. The claim I make here is simple. More humans must learn to read, hear, and feel this other language and its dialects, whether feminine or not, in order to find the beginning of a culture of difference. It's like learning to listen to a new kind of song or a new kind of music, right? It's like listening to a new style of rap or rap in a new language, right? Some revolutions, that culture of difference is a revolution in motion already. Now, I wrote this ages ago, so that revolution in motion has been kind of stuck in aspic, just slowly crunching forward through the goo for all of these decades because, third and fourth wave feminism decided to be patriarchal accomplices. But a culture in revolution, an insurgent culture of difference, a language that wants to erupt into the linear and the didactic, is overlooking some of the basics. Some revolutions forget about how people will get their food and water. I would like ours not to be such a one. The symbolic, the imaginary of that future culture requires an expanded ability to read, and that leads it to a new shape of mind. But that shape of mind is going to require food and shelter and energy and community. going to require that we esteem people differently. Here I go back to Maslow again. The stakes are waged. They've been waged for decades. Feminism kicks back. Feminism kicks back. How shall I trace my history back and all it built on my future? Which histories shall I choose? Which ancestor women, rankled as I am that his genealogy is bedrock, if not all beautiful and good, and even if it stands on the shoulders of a father who is a mask for a mother? And if that is so, I should want this revolution for both of us, for all of us. If my story and his story both fail us, his for being a dodge, mine for being written by him, then don't we both need new stories? And might all the work we did so far, together and apart, require examination for its correspondence to our two truths as we create them in the next minute and tomorrow? And if so, would we rather have some popcorn and watch the show instead? Would we rather cling to what we have lost?
Now, Jonathan Culler was a literary theorist and critic who hoped that we would not just stop there and watch the show. And he knew
from his deep study of Derrida that deconstruction is a kind of feminine operation in the metaphysical discourse erupting kind of way. He was worried that feminism had too much adapted itself to our male default longstanding cultural habits. He wrote this: the relationship of feminism to literary studies, insert all of culture, the relationship of feminism to literary studies has always been close, beginning with the pioneering work of Simone de Beauvoir and Kate Millett. But of course, feminism is far more than a movement in literary theory or criticism, and its larger ambitions of changing the conditions of women wherever they are to be found stands in a curious relation to the gloomy tone, for instance, of a conference paper like Disappearing Acts, or rumors of the demise of feminism of its 21st century endgame are hardly exaggerated. The talk of the death of feminism, like the talk of the death of theory, originates with those who would be happy to have it die. But their trope is disseminated by those who, like the author of the conference paper, complain that feminism or theory has lost the radical innovatory edge that it once possessed. A kind of boomerang in history deals a blow to feminism. It's Laura Bush's denunciation of the condition of women under the Taliban, a stance so unobjectionable, women should not be treated the way the Taliban are treating them, that the author of this conference paper suggests that both Judith Butler and Phyllis Schlafly, or Lynn Cheney and Gloria Steinem, or Condoleezza Rice and Hillary Clinton would all agree that the treatment of the Taliban of women is terrible. And indeed, they all did over time say that, all of them. But none of that meant doing anything about it, and it still doesn't. It's a feminism so undistinctive, so mainstreamed, that it has become full circle. The resultant goal, a Mobius strip, to mix metaphors. It knocks feminism's legs out from under it. This easy, women should just be equal, women should have choicey choice. Patriarchy light. Feminism. It means that women who object to and women who want to bomb Afghanistan can both say that the Taliban are bad because of the way that they treat women, but that does nothing about the bombing of Afghanistan. That does nothing about the bombing of Iran. That doesn't do anything to stop what's happening in Gaza now. We can all say that what is happening in Gaza now is terrible. We can all say that what is happening to women in Gaza is terrible. But Phyllis Schlafly would agree. Condoleezza Rice would agree. But that wouldn't get them both on the team that wants the destruction of Gaza to stop. These women, this more generalized, agreeable feminism, it succumbs to an immobility of habits, right? The weight and the accretion of the habits of masculinist or male default culture, to its tone and manner, to the behavior and content that it demands. It's okay to say that women should be treated well. It's not okay to actually get there. In each liberated nation, we have our examples. In order to have a real chance of a future, we learned that in tandem with the masculinist matter, we need not indulgent, we need a feminist manner as well. While the attitude of the Taliban toward women is the logical terminus of patriarchy and masculinism, even in a still patriarchal West, deploring it is easy here. It seems awful, but only because we don't publicly think too much about what happens to women in our own countries. Or as these sisters move between them in vans and shipping crates to this day. Feminism asks herself, one foot still in the loose mud of the Enlightenment, one arm reaching past the pack of falsehoods. In postmodernism, it is what we say it is. We say it is not bad for you. The other foot in full shimmy, always at work, always kinetic and strident and nearly flailing. The other arm with its elegant hand, dreaming futures, plumbing languages, finding logics, feminine to balance that man whose gyroscope hasn't even got a geometrical center. And for all the dancing and singing, what? There are days when my faith, even in myself, wanes low and dusky. What I was hoping when I wrote this early meditation, that turned out not to be the paper I ended up writing at all, but this early meditation was that we would be very far along the road now, thinking about being two kinds of people in history, men and women, having two different experiences in history, men and women. But we're not. We have more and more and more surrendered to these weird, involuted laws of gender, right? So much so that we have to change bodies now if we don't want to play the game, right? We can only not play the game by playing the game in a different body, which doesn't seem to change the game if you're still playing it. I would still want us to write this kind of magical écriture futuriste where we start to hear, what Ashira had to say, what Lilith had to say. What did God's wife have to say? What did Adam's first wife really have to say before she got up in her war and started and left the garden? Where did she go? The first known author in all of history, the first named author in all of history, is a priestess of the Sumerian moon god whose name is going to escape me. I think it was Inanna? Not Inanna, but I can't remember. Anyway, the moon god of the Sumerians. And her name was Eduhana. And she signed her work. She was the first author to sign her work, to leave her name on her poetry, to leave her name on her prayers and supplications. She claimed her work. And it wasn't too long before men stopped letting women sign any of our work and started disappearing all the signs that we or the goddesses had ever been there. Because, God, the competition in their little tiny world, in its little tiny circle, in its little pie that it can't grow more fruit to fill, is just so weak and little and thin. And yet it's enough, isn't it? To keep us here, to keep us barreling off the cliff towards the death that is the only perfection that system can really imagine, as much as it's terrified of its death. It wants permanence. It wants immortality. And those are the same thing. Anyway, I just wanted to talk at you for a little while. If you want to come at me and talk about this stuff, hang out, think a little bit about these ways of writing or experiments that you've done, trying to sort of anchor yourself more fully in your relation to the feminine, the goddess, to a metaphysical kind of feminine. Let me know. Because, I think the key thing for me about whether or not this is essentialism is that there is a thing called man, and there are people called men, and they're all very different from each other, but they are all assumed to partake of man, and that's not called essentialism, that's called humanity. And when women say, but there are all these different kinds of women, and they all participate in woman, in the feminine, that's essentialism, and we have to try to smash it with hammers. Sisters, listeners, for the gift of your attention. We know your life energy is precious, and so is ours. We make this podcast for free, so you can pay us by telling your feminist friends about it. Like it, share it, recommend this RadMat Femme conversation everywhere that you're listening to us. Because manipulating the algorithm is a postmodern form of magic, and we need to make that system feminist. Tend to yourselves, stay witchy, and build worlds for women over at medusarising.org. I'll see you soon.